$800,000, and my family thought the only thing standing between them and that number was my signature on a Sunday. I am Penelope Light, 34 years old, and for over a decade I have spent my days tracing title chains, reading who legally owns what and who was lying about it. 3 months ago, I let my Uncle Rick's power of attorney slide past its filing deadline without saying a word, because Denise, my grandmother's caretaker, told me it was just a formality. I told myself family does not need a notary stamp to prove they love each other. Then last Sunday, Denise slid a new trust document across my grandmother's dinner table and asked me to witness it, the exact hand that had already quietly recorded a deed against that house, now reaching for the rest of the estate. That was the last time I told myself it was nothing. You do not owe silence to people who call your discomfort a scene. First, I will walk you through the dinner where they handed me that trust like it was already settled. Then, I will show you exactly what I found sitting in the public record before I ever picked up a pen. And finally, I will break down the 3 words nobody in that family expected me to say out loud. Before I tell you what happened when the notary checked her stamp, drop your city and local time below. My grandmother's kitchen still smells like the same thing it smelled like when I was 9 years old. Coffee grounds and the faint mineral edge of well water running through an old copper pipe. My grandmother's name is Marion White, 78 years old, and until March, she still balanced her own checkbook by hand, ink pen, straight columns, no calculator. I grew up 2 streets over from her house on Larkspur Lane, and every Sunday for as long as I can remember, the whole family folded into that kitchen for dinner. Pot roasts most weeks. Her hands smelled of rosemary before they smelled of anything else. I work in a windowless records office on the 2nd floor of the county annex, running title searches for a small firm that closes maybe 11 transactions a month. Deed histories, easements, liens, the occasional clouded title that takes 3 weeks to untangle. It is not glamorous work. Most of my family treats it like I catalog paper clips for a living, but I am good at it. Good enough that a senior partner once handed me a file nobody else wanted to touch, a title with 4 owners of record and only 2 of them still alive, and I cleared it in 9 days. My mother always introduced me the same way at parties. This is Penelope. She's the responsible one. It sounded like a compliment for the first 20 years. By year 30, it started sounding like a job description nobody had asked me to accept. My younger brother Tyler got to be the fun one, the one who showed up late and left early and never once got asked to co-sign anything. I got asked to co-sign a par loan for my cousin when I was 26. I still have 11 payments left on a truck I've never driven. The moral anchor in my life back then was a man named Walt, 71, who ran the copy machine and the front counter at the same records office for 32 years before he retired last spring. Walt used to bring me black coffee in a chipped ceramic mug he kept in his desk drawer. No cream, no sugar. And he would set it on the corner of my desk without a word most mornings. He never once asked me to explain a file to him or return the favor. He just liked that I said good morning like I meant it. Once, during a January ice storm, he drove 40 minutes out of his way to bring me a spare space heater because the annex furnace had gone out, and he remembered I mentioned being cold 3 days earlier, a comment I had already forgotten making. When he retired, he left the mug behind on my desk with a sticky note that said, "You don't owe anybody an explanation for being careful." I kept the mug. I never drank out of it again. It just sits there, empty, next to my monitor, a reminder that not every relationship in my life comes with a bill attached. My grandmother hired a caretaker in February after she slipped on the back porch steps and cracked 2 ribs. The caretaker's name is Denise, 46, calm voice, always dressed like she was on her way somewhere important, the kind of composed that makes a room quietly defer to her before she has said a full sentence. Denise moved into the guest room within 3 weeks, citing convenience, citing Marion's fall risk overnight, citing nothing anyone thought to question at the time. By April, she was handling Marion's mail, sorting it into 2 piles on the kitchen counter before Marion ever saw it. By May, she was driving her to every appointment, standing in on every phone call with the bank, standing just close enough in every family conversation that Marion started glancing at her before answering even simple questions. "What do you want for dinner, Marion?" A half-second pause. A look at Denise. "Whatever is easiest." I noticed it first in June at a birthday lunch for my cousin's daughter. Marion used to be the loudest person at any table, the one who told the same 3 stories every year and made them funnier each time. That afternoon, she said maybe 11 words total, and every one of them came after a glance toward the end of the table where Denise sat, cutting a piece of cake into smaller and smaller pieces she never actually ate. Nobody else seemed to clock it. I clocked it the way I clock a signature that doesn't quite match the one on file 3 pages earlier, a small wrongness that sits under the skin long after the moment passes. Nobody in my family found that strange. My Uncle Rick, 52, had been named Marion's power of attorney years earlier, back when she first started slowing down after my grandfather passed. Rick handled it the way Rick handled most responsibilities that required a follow-up appointment, which is to say he did the minimum once and never looked at it again. The state changed its notarization requirements for financial power of attorney documents 2 years ago, requiring a re-acknowledgment on file every 24 months for the authorization to remain active. Rick never filed it. The power of attorney he'd been quietly relying on for 6 years had technically expired 3 months before Denise ever moved a box into that guest room. I found that out by accident, the way I find most things out, because I was bored on the Tuesday night and pulled the county recorder's database on my grandmother's property just to check the tax assessment for an unrelated reason. What I found instead was a quitclaim deed, filed 6 weeks earlier, transferring a 25% interest in Marion's house into something called the Meridian Family Care Trust. The grantor's signature line used Rick's name as power of attorney. The instrument number sat right there on the page, clean, time-stamped, public. Instrument number 244117. I pulled the underlying power of attorney next, the one Rick had been quietly relying on for 6 years, and cross-checked the re-acknowledgment requirement the state had adopted 2 years earlier. The last valid re-acknowledgment on file was dated 11 months before that requirement even took effect. Nothing after it. No renewal, no re-notarization, nothing. The authorization had gone stale on its own timeline, and nobody had noticed, least of all Rick. I read it twice to make sure I was not misunderstanding what I was looking at. I was not. I have a habit from work that follows me everywhere, squaring paper edges flush against whatever surface is in front of me, straightening a stack until every corner lines up, even when the stack doesn't need straightening. I did that Tuesday night for almost 10 minutes straight after I closed the browser tab, lining and relining a stack of unrelated mail on my kitchen table until my hands stopped wanting to shake. My apartment was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the tick of the stove clock, and I remember staring at that mail stack, thinking about my grandmother's hands wrapped around a water glass at that birthday lunch, both of us apparently seeing the same thing from 2 different distances. I didn't call my mother. I didn't call Rick. I sat with it for 4 days, turning it over the way you turn over a stone in a pond, waiting to see what crawls out from underneath. On the 3rd night, I drove past Marion's house at 9 in the evening and saw Denise's sedan parked at an angle across 2 spots in the driveway, lights on in the front room, a shadow moving behind the curtain that stayed still for a long time in one spot, like someone standing over a table reading something. I didn't go in. I told myself I needed more before I said anything out loud, and some part of me, the part that had spent 34 years being the responsible one, was still hoping I was wrong. Then Sunday dinner arrived, same as it always did, and everything I had been quietly holding got dragged into that kitchen whether I was ready. The table was set for 14 that night. More chairs than usual, borrowed from the garage and wedged in at odd angles around the dining room, which should have told me something before anyone said a word. My mother had ordered a cake from the Good Bakery downtown, the one that runs $80 for a 2-layer cake nobody actually asked for. There was a bottle of champagne already open on the sideboard, condensation sliding down the glass, though nobody had explained what we were supposed to be celebrating. I counted 6 cars in the driveway and along the curb when I pulled in, 2 more than a normal Sunday, which meant people had been asked to come who did not usually come. Marion sat at the head of the table in the same spot she had sat in for 40 years, and Denise sat directly to her right, closer than family usually sits, a manila folder squared perfectly in front of her plate before anyone had even served the rolls. I was given the seat at the far corner, near the kitchen door, the one nobody ever fights for because it means getting up twice to grab things people forgot. Nobody assigned it to me on purpose. Nobody had to. It was simply where the responsible one always ended up, close enough to be useful, far enough to be easy to talk past. I noticed the seating without meaning to, the same way I notice a filing error, a small detail that would matter later even though it looked like nothing in the moment. My grandmother's hands were shaking slightly around her water glass when Rick stood up and tapped his fork against his own, the universal signal for a toast nobody had agreed to in advance. He talked for maybe 45 seconds about family taking care of family, about how grateful we all should be that Marion had someone as devoted as Denise looking out for her these past few months, about how it was time the rest of us stepped up the way Denise already had. Then he sat back down and Denise opened the folder. Inside was a new trust document, 12 pages, already tabbed at 3 signature lines with small yellow sticky flags. Denise slid it down the table until it stopped directly in front of me. She smiled the kind of smile that has practiced looking natural in a mirror. She said, "We just need a witness signature here, Penelope. You're the one who actually reads paperwork. This is really just a formality to protect Grandma's wishes." I looked at my grandmother instead of the document. Marion was staring at her plate, both hands wrapped around a water glass she had not taken a single sip of all night. Knuckles pale, jaw tight in a way I recognized from every photograph of her taken during the 6 months after my grandfather's funeral. She did not look at me. She did not look at anyone. My mother leaned toward me and said it quiet enough to sound gentle and firm enough to sound like it was not actually a request. "You don't need a spreadsheet to love family, Penelope. Just sign it." I set my fork down slowly on the edge of my plate, the small metal sound of it landing louder in that room than it had any right to be. I did not reach for the pen sitting on top of the folder. I thought about the instrument number I had memorized without meaning to, about a power of attorney that had quietly stopped existing 3 months before this dinner ever got planned, about a chipped mug sitting empty on my desk 2 towns away that had never once asked me to prove I loved anybody by handing something over. Rick's jaw tightened when I did not reach for the pen. My Aunt Carla, 50, who had said maybe 6 words to me all year, suddenly found something urgent to say about how family does not do this, does not make things difficult in front of everyone, does not turn a simple signature into a whole production. 14 people, 3 of them children who had wandered in from the living room drawn by the raised voices, all waiting on me to just make it easy, the way I always had. I looked at Denise instead of the folder. I asked her one question, quiet, level, the same tone I use when I am confirming a file number over the phone. I asked her which power of attorney she had used to file the quitclaim deed 6 weeks ago. The room went completely silent, the kind of silence that has weight to it, that presses against your ears the way water does. Somewhere behind me, the ice in someone's glass shifted, one small clean click against the side of the tumbler, the loudest sound in the house for a full 3 seconds. Denise's smile did not move, but something behind her eyes did, a small flicker, gone almost as fast as it arrived. Rick's fork, still in his hand, made a small sound against his plate as his grip shifted. My mother's mouth opened like she was about to smooth it over, the way she had smoothed over every uncomfortable silence at that table since I was a child, and for the first time in my life, I watched her decide not to. I did not raise my voice. I did not stand. I kept both hands flat on the table on either side of my plate, my untouched water glass sitting exactly where it had been set down 20 minutes earlier, and I waited, like I wait when a title search comes back with a name that does not match, patient, procedural, in no hurry at all to fill a silence that was not mine to fix. If you have ever had a family member treat your hard work like an open bank account, type the word boundaries in the comments right now. I answered my own question before Denise could. I told the table that the power of attorney Rick had been signing under expired 11 months before the state's new re-acknowledgment rule ever took effect, and that nothing had been filed since, which meant every transaction completed under that authorization since February, including a quitclaim deed recorded 6 weeks ago against Marion's house, had been executed without valid legal standing. I did not raise my voice to say it. I said it the way I read a file number into a phone, flat, exact, already moving toward the next line before anyone could interrupt. Rick's face went the color of old drywall. My mother's hand found the edge of the table like she needed something to hold on to. Denise did not answer the question. She reached instead for the folder in front of her and slid it half an inch closer to herself, a small defensive motion, the kind you make when you're protecting something rather than presenting it. I stood up, not fast, not dramatic, the same way I stand up to walk to the copier at work. I told the table I needed a minute, and I walked toward the kitchen, past the sideboard with its sweating champagne bottle, into the hallway that led to Marion's small home office, where she used to pay bills by hand every second Tuesday of the month. The door was cracked open. On the desk sat an open ledger, Marion's handwriting on the early pages, someone else's on the later ones, a column of withdrawals from the joint account Denise had been added to in March, $4,200 in March, $6,100 in April, $9,800 in May, numbers that climbed every month like a fever nobody had bothered to take. I did not touch the ledger. I read it where it said, top to bottom, twice, the way you read a settlement statement you are about to be asked to explain to a client who has no idea what half the line items mean. The desk lamp threw a small yellow circle of light across the pages, and past it, the rest of the office sat in shadow, Marion's old Rolodex still on the corner of the desk, untouched since sometime around when Denise moved in. A framed photo of my grandfather sat face down next to it, glass reflecting the ceiling light at an angle that told me somebody had knocked it over recently and not bothered to set it right. I noted that too, the way you note a torn corner on an otherwise clean document, a small detail that tells you more about a room than anyone in it wants you to know. Then I walked back into the dining room and did not sit down. I told the table I was going to step over to Marion's kitchen counter to make a phone call. Nobody stopped me. The kitchen still smelled faintly of the pot roast nobody had finished, and the tile floor was cold through my socks, where I had kicked my shoes off out of habit at the back door hours earlier. I called the notary service Marion's bank used for account changes, a number I had saved in my phone years ago after helping a client through a similar mess, and I asked one question, whether an authorization on file under a specific instrument number was still active on record. The woman on the line put me on hold for 90 seconds, elevator music thin and tinny through the phone speaker, while I stood at the counter and squared a stack of unopened mail sitting there without thinking about why my hands had gone looking for something to straighten. When she came back, she confirmed what I already knew. Then I called the bank's fraud line and asked to place a hold on any pending transfer tied to that account until the authorization on file could be verified. The representative asked for the account holder's date of birth and the last 4 digits of her social security number, which I gave from memory, a detail I had known cold since I was a teenager, helping Marion balance her checkbook at that same kitchen counter. It took 4 minutes. I did not raise my voice once during either call. Back at the table, I set my phone down and looked at my grandmother instead of anyone else. I told her, quietly, that the man at the head of the table did not have the legal authority to sign for her anymore, and that the folder in front of Denise was built on top of paperwork that had already stopped being valid months earlier. Marion's hands, still wrapped around that untouched water glass, went still in a way I had never seen them go still before, not shaking anymore, just still. Denise finally spoke. She said I was overreacting, that I was turning a family dinner into a legal circus over a technicality, that Marion had asked for this trust herself, that I did not understand the full picture. I told her I understood the instrument number, the recording date, and the account ledger sitting open on the desk down the hall, and that I was happy to let the county recorder and the bank's compliance department finish explaining the full picture to everyone at this table. I did not need a spreadsheet to love my grandmother. I needed a phone, 4 minutes, and the chipped mug's worth of patience I had been saving my whole life without knowing what I was saving it for. The dinner did not end there. It ended somewhere much colder, 20 minutes later, in a room that had gone from celebration to reckoning without anyone changing the lighting. Rick tried to recover first, the way people who've been caught always try to recover, by getting louder instead of more honest. He said family does not call banks on family, that I had humiliated him in front of everyone over paperwork, that I was choosing some abstract rule over the people who raised me. I let him finish. I did not interrupt. When he was done, I told him, still seated, still at conversational volume, that he had let an authorization lapse and never noticed, and that Denise noticed for him and used it. I told him the numbers out loud, exactly as I had read them off Marion's ledger. 4,200 in March, 6,100 in April, 9,800 in May. Nobody at that table said a word while I said them. Nobody needed to. The numbers did the work I did not have to raise my voice to do. My Aunt Carla stood up and said this was exactly the kind of thing that tears families apart, that I should have brought this to someone privately instead of turning dinner into a spectacle. I told her I had tried privacy for 4 days, and privacy produced a folder with 3 signature lines already flagged in yellow. I told her the spectacle had not been built by me. Carla sat back down without responding, her chair leg scraping once against the hardwood, and reached for the water pitcher instead of looking at anyone, the same reflex people reach for when they need their hands to do something other than hold still. My mother finally spoke, quieter than I had ever heard her at that table, and asked how long I had known. I told her 4 days. She asked why I had not called her first. I told her because the last 3 times I had raised a concern about how things were being handled at Marion's house, I had been told I was overthinking it, and I did not have 4 more days to spend being told that again while a hold I could have requested with 1 phone call sat unrequested. She did not have an answer for that. Nobody did. Denise's composure finally cracked somewhere around the 3rd time her phone buzzed in her pocket, a call she did not answer, her eyes flicking toward the front door every few seconds like she was recalculating a distance. The bank's fraud line called Marion's cell directly 9 minutes after my call, confirming the hold, asking to speak with the account holder to verify a short list of recent transactions. Marion answered it herself, her voice steadier than it had been all evening, and read back, 1 at a time, 3 withdrawals she confirmed she had never authorized. Rick tried the card next, not thinking it through, reaching for his wallet like sheer motion could undo the last 9 minutes. He said he would just cover the caterer's deposit himself to prove this was all overblown, some invoice Denise had apparently already arranged for a signing party that never got its signing. The card declined. He laughed it off, said the bank system was probably backed up. Tried again. Ice shifted in a glass 3 seats down, 1 small, clean sound in a room that had gone otherwise silent. Second decline. His jaw tightened, and for the first time all night, he looked less angry than afraid. A chair scraped back somewhere near the sideboard as my cousin stood to get water nobody had asked for, just to have something to do with her hands. Third decline. Nobody laughed that time. Nobody spoke either. The room did what a title report does when a lien finally surfaces. It went quiet in the specific way a room goes quiet when everyone realizes the story they had been telling themselves doesn't match the record. Denise stood up first. She said something about needing to check on Marion's medication schedule, a task that had never once required her to leave a room this fast before, and she walked toward the guest room instead of the front door, which told me exactly how much she still thought she had left to salvage. I did not watch her go.
I told my grandmother plainly that I loved her, that the county recorder's office opened at 8 a.m. the next morning, and that I would drive her there myself. Then I looked at Rick, who still hadn't put his phone down, and I said the only thing I had left to say to him. You always told me family takes care of family, so why was I the only one who ever did? Nobody answered. I did not wait for an answer. I stood up, unhurriedly, and walked to Marion's front hall closet, where I collected the small tote bag I had brought with a folder of my own inside, a printed copy of the expired power of attorney and the recorded deed, the paperwork I actually came prepared to need. I walked out through the kitchen door instead of the front, past the porch steps where Marion had fallen back in February, past the spot on the railing where the paint had chipped down to bare wood years ago and never got touched up, out to my car parked at the curb under the one streetlight on that stretch of Larkspur Lane that had buzzed with a faint electrical hum for as long as I can remember. Gravel crunched under my shoes the whole way, cold night air carrying the smell of somebody's charcoal grill 2 houses down, ordinary and indifferent to everything that had just happened inside. The old wisteria vine over the side gate brushed against my shoulder the same way it had every summer of my life, damp with early evening dew. I did not look back at the house. I did not need to. I could hear the silence following me all the way to the car door. Type the word seat in the comments below if you know what it feels like to finally stop paying for a chair at their table. The drive home was quiet in a way that felt earned rather than empty. I did not turn on the radio. I kept both hands on the wheel at 10 and 2, the same way I had been taught at 16, and somewhere around the second red light I noticed my shoulders had dropped about 2 inches from where they usually sat. What happened after that dinner was mostly paperwork, which felt right, since paperwork was what had started all of it. Marion and I filed a report with the county the following Tuesday. The recorded quitclaim deed was flagged for review within 11 days and ultimately voided for lack of valid authorization at time of execution. Rick, once he understood the scope of what Denise had actually done, with an authorization he never should have let lapse, cooperated fully with the bank's investigation, which recovered most of the $20,100 moved out of Marion's account between March and May. Denise was gone from the guest room within the week, and the last I heard, the county attorney's office was still deciding what to formally charge. The family has not fully recovered, and I am not sure it should. Rick filed the required re-acknowledgment within the week, 6 months late by any honest measure, and started seeing his own financial advisor for the first time in his adult life, something he mentioned to me almost sheepishly, like admitting it was harder than admitting the mistake itself. Rick and I speak maybe once a month now, careful, polite, the kind of relationship you rebuild slowly if you rebuild it at all. My mother apologized once in a text message, 3 sentences long, sent at 11 at night on a Wednesday, and I have not decided yet whether 3 sentences is enough. Carla has not apologized at all, and some part of me has made a quiet peace with the possibility that she never will. Marion started seeing a counselor twice a month, something Denise had actively discouraged for reasons that make more sense now than they did then, framed at the time as Marion not needing to relive anything unnecessarily. Marion tells me it helps more than she expected it to, that having somewhere to say things out loud without anyone in the room glancing at her first has been its own kind of relief. She moved her accounts to a new bank branch across town, one with a manager who now calls her personally every quarter just to check in, no request required. Trust, I have learned, behaves a lot like a title chain. Once a broken link gets recorded into it, you can't simply talk your way past it. You have to go back, find the exact place it broke, and file the correction properly, in public, where everyone can see it. There is no shortcut through a cloud on a title. There is only the work of clearing it.
Most mornings now, I still sit at the same desk in that windowless records office, and the chipped mug still sits empty by my monitor, though a few weeks ago I finally rinsed the dust out of it and started keeping a handful of paper clips inside instead, which felt less like letting go of Walt and more like finally putting the mug to use the way he probably would have wanted. I still catch myself squaring the edges of a stack of papers that do not need squaring, but it happens less often now, and when it does, it feels more like a habit than a defense. Some Sunday evenings, Marion and I sit in her kitchen with the coffee actually poured this time, 2 cups, nobody watching either of us to see how we answer a simple question. She tells the same 3 stories again now, the way she used to, and they are still funnier every time. Last week, she asked me, halfway through pouring, whether I ever regretted saying anything that night. I told her the only thing I regretted was waiting 4 days instead of 4 hours. She reached over and squared the edge of a napkin on the table without seeming to notice she had done it, and I did not point it out, because some habits are simply what steady hands do while the rest of a person catches up. If someone in your own life has ever made you feel like your quiet reliability was theirs to spend without asking, I want you to hear this plainly. Being careful with the truth is not the same thing as being cold. Reading the fine print is not the same thing as not loving somebody. You are allowed to be the one who checks the paperwork. You are allowed to be the one who finally says no. And you are allowed to stop paying for a seat nobody ever earned the right to reserve in your name. Type the word chosen in the comments if you have had to build your own piece from scratch. Subscribe if you're ready to stop shrinking to fit rooms you were never meant to pay for.